Steve Moran here with another episode of Foresight TV. I hope you are all having a great weekend. I guess this is the week, 4th of July week, right? So probably only half of you are working. You'll all watch it next week. I have got a industry insider, Kai. Am I doing it? Hsiao, is that right?
Pretty good, there, Steve. Yeah, you spot on.
Nice job. The last names always struggle with me. So we're going to jump into a conversation first, but let me run our intro. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Well, Kai, welcome to Foresight TV. I think this is the first time I've ever had you on. You have been in the industry forever in some really significant positions. You have made a difference in the industry. You've got some intriguing ideas that we're going to talk about along the way. But why don't you just sort of give us maybe a little bio of who you are? And then I'd actually like to talk about kind of where you see the future of the industry. And we'll just dig into that.
Yeah, sure. Look, I got into senior housing back in 2008. Got into it because I was a part of the Holiday retirement team. Eventually, became the CEO there at Holiday, and then after that, went to go work for Health Peak, the healthcare REIT, and after that, formed Eclipse Senior Living, and then just in January, I joined a group called Keppel Capital.
Terrific. And what do they do?
Yeah, so Keppel Capital is a conglomerate. They own a bunch of different, they're in a bunch of different industries: data centers, energy, transportation. They're based in Singapore, but they have a huge focus moving forward. They understand that healthcare is a great, global need. So they asked me to sort of help them sort of build out their healthcare platform. So that includes, really acquiring healthcare assets, and that would be senior living, medical office building, maybe some hospitals along the way. And we do it here in the United States, Canada, and then out in the UK and in Asia as well.
So it's interesting to me that they would view senior living as sort of part of the healthcare continuum. And I think this is sort of an industry struggle, right? There are elements of healthcare, but we sort of, particularly when you look at skilled nursing, there's this real arm's length, that's not us. So Can you just talk to me about that thinking and how you see it?
Look, I can appreciate, there's always been that sort of balance between hospitality and healthcare. But I do think, especially with COVID, I think we've all understood that, we are pretty firmly, in the healthcare camp, especially, as, COVID came out and we as an industry, we were in line looking for, government assistance as part of the healthcare spectrum as well. And at the end of the day, we do take care of residents and we care for residents. Look at our labor, challenge right now. Yeah. Part of our labor challenge is going on because, healthcare labor, is in a pinch, and that starts, from hospitals all the way down to skilled nursing, and it's impacting us now too. So I would definitely say that, that balance on that, is definitely tiered towards the healthcare side.
So I've written a little bit about it, and I've thought a lot about it. This idea that the industry seems to be drawn towards the hospitality side. Yeah. And yet it seems like really our bread and butter is much more on the care side. And so what I find myself at times wondering is if we are sort of our desire to do hobby lifestyle and hospitality is actually unrealistic. And so I'd be glad to have you argue back or agree with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I don't think it needs to be binary. I think, you could be both. And I think, that's really where we set the, the industry is a little bit bipolar when you think about it, right? Because
it is, yeah.
Because the genesis of senior living came from developers who were either in multifamily or maybe in hospitality, and they thought senior living was a great real estate class to be in. And but we do provide services and we do provide care, right? Especially on the assisted living and memory care side of things. So that has evolved over time, and as people age in place, as acuity goes up, more and more people are becoming entrenched and integrated with healthcare completely. So again, I don't think it is binary. You can actually do both. You could provide hospitality like services, but you can also provide care as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think it is really bifurcated. I'm actually going to be in Florida in 2 weeks. I'm doing keynote for Leading Age Florida. So if any of you are going to be there, I'd love to see you. But one of my side trips that I'm planning on doing is to go to the Margaritaville Latitudes property in Daytona Beach. We spent a lot of time talking about it, but I'm not sure I've ever actually talked to anybody who's visited it. And so hoping to go there, write about it, talk about it, maybe shoot some video while I'm there. And it's a great example of, I'm not sure they would categorize themselves as senior living. I don't know, would you call them senior living?
Look, I would call them, a great lifestyle living, for a certain age group. I've been there before, and those folks have a lot of fun. So, I think they're enjoying, their retirement right now.
Yeah. So when you look at the industry, where we are, where we've come from, what are your great hopes and great fears for the future?
Look, if you take a look at the population, and everyone sees the demographics, I think, this industry, has a lot of, tailwinds, right? I mean, there's a lot of positives for it. As I mentioned before, I'm not from senior housing originally. I was back in hospitality at a place called Canyon Ranch. I was in retail working for a company called Macerich. They built malls. And then, my career actually started in advertising. So, look, I think senior housing it's very young in its industry stage, right? I've always said that senior housing is probably 20 years behind hospitality, 10 years behind multifamily in terms of the life cycle. And we're still learning a lot about, what we can and who we want to be. We're sort of our teenage years right now, right? Yeah. So I think there's, a great, runway for the industry because of the demographics that we have in front of us.
What do you see the biggest challenges that we face?
Gosh, look, I think there's a whole host of them. Right now, I think one of the immediate challenges is on the labor side. I think everyone's feeling that right now. And part of that is, while we have the benefit of, the aging population, and that growing, that's a plus for us. It's different on the labor side, because when you think about it, the labor has always been a bit of a population pyramid, where at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got a lot of sort of young folks who can care for, top of the pyramid who are, older in age. That pyramid's looking more like a rectangle, and down the road, it'll look like an upside down pyramid. Yeah. So that you've got fewer people caring for more people up on top. And we're feeling a bit of that sort of population change right now. That's sort of the macro dynamics of it. The micro dynamics is, COVID changed everything. Everyone shut down and everyone tried to open up at the same time, which meant there was a huge, just sort of, whirlwind of activity on trying to get all the labor back. And you've had a lot of people in that, sort of 40 plus year age bracket who said, hey, do I just cash out, retire early, go do my own business, get out of the race and try to do my own thing? And so you've had that sort of labor force sort of shrink on you over time here.
Yeah, and it's tough. I live in Sacramento, and we did it. My wife and I did a one night overnighter up to Reno, when we stopped in Truckee at Taco Bell just to grab a bite to eat. And there was
Yeah,
a help wanted sign, and starting $18 an hour for somebody to, basically make burritos, and that becomes our competition. And so it's a really, really interesting challenge. Although, as I've been sort of thinking through this, right now the government still prefers home care for people when they're funding it, because it's much less expensive than senior living. But I find myself wondering that, probably not maybe 10 years down the road, as the caregiver pool shrinks and the number of older people increases, whether we might get to a day where caregivers are making $40 an hour. I know it sounds crazy right now,
yeah,
but that the only way anybody can actually afford caregiving at all is inside a community, except for the very, very wealthy, because the caregivers become much more efficient. So I'm pretty optimistic too. So that we're
look,
going to figure it
yeah, I mean, look, I think, look, that there's the immediate needs of, sort of, getting labor today, and I think a lot of operators are adjusting, their worlds to do so. Whereas before, people were used to, posting an ad on Indeed and waiting for, applications to come in.
out.
They've had to get much more aggressive. I mean, basically the sales mentality on the recruiting side these days, right? So that's sort of the immediate stuff. I do think, if you think about it from a sort of, I remember one of my mentors always said, it's always about people and then math, right? So on the
Yeah.
math side, you've got the numerator and the denominator. On the numerator, you're trying to get people who are already in sort of the workforce to start thinking about healthcare, right? And I think a great way to do that, and this is something that I think, the folks over at Argentum are pushing for, is to provide what I call a healthcare GI Bill. So you remember there was a GI Bill that was trying to, it would pay for people's college so that they would join the military. I think
Yep.
if we can do something similar where we're helping people to pay for college if they go into healthcare, I think that'll start, putting a spotlight and getting people to think about going to the healthcare industry that maybe they weren't thinking about it before. So that's on the numerator side, right? On the
Right.
denominator, you've got to grow the base of people who are, grow the whole population base of labor force. And I think this is another case where I think, immigration reform is going to be very important for us moving
Yeah.
forward. If we don't bring in more labor, it's just not going to be able to support, the number of seniors out there down the road.
Yeah, and no question, that's true. So you've mentioned Argentum a little bit. One of the things that I think is very unique about senior living is that we seem to have more conferences and more trade associations than perhaps any other vertical in the world. I mean, we've got, some of it is just, conference producers, but in leading age sort of dominates the not-for-profit side, although I know that there's at least one state leading age where they're looking at their marketplace and saying, we don't see a lot of new construction in senior living. And so we're actually going to invite in the for-profit operators who are really high quality, because that's really consistent with our mission. But one of the sort of the great curiosities that we have on the for-profit side is, of course, we got ACA and Cal, which is primarily nursing home, but hits assisted living in particular. And then we've got ASHA and Argentum that seem almost the same, honestly. And
Yeah.
7 years ago, Charlotte, Granger Cobb and some other people had this initiative to try to pull it together. It looked like it was going to happen. It fell apart. And you've sort of been advocating that maybe it's time to revisit that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, look, I think it's just common sense, right? I mean, to your point, if you take a look at the mission, of ASHA, if you take a look at the mission of Argentum, they're very similar. I mean, I think you just change out the logos, and they're trying to do the same thing. And so the question becomes, hey, are we actually as an industry benefit from having two trade associations with the same mission? And I think the answer to that is, look what happened during COVID. I think having different trade associations can confuse the message that's out there. I think, it's hard for people, on public policy people up on the Hill to know, hey, who speaks for the industry when you've got multiple voices, sort of whispering in their ears. And sometimes the messaging isn't consistent. And I think that confuses things as well. So, look, I think, the old, verbiage they were using was one voice, right? Look, I'm not sure if it's one voice, but I do know that I think, one message is going to be something that is, only beneficial for the industry moving forward. It is very confusing. I mean, when you think about it, right now, there are still a lot of folks who don't understand what assisted living is, right? When they think of, retirement centers, they're still automatically, the default is still, skilled nursing, right?
It's nursing homes,
nursing homes. So that's tough. And again, I think the, 1 + 1 doesn't necessarily equal 2 in this case. And I say that too, when you take a look at just the amount of, like I said before, it comes down to people and math. The math, for the two associations in terms of what they spent in public policy, look, if it was one big bucket that had one, lobbyist group that had, one PR group, I think you get a lot more out of it than having two separate groups, trying to clamor for voice there, right? Again, take a look at what happened with ACA MCAL. The amount that they got from a dollar standpoint from the government, probably, I think actually more than 10 times what assisted living got. They were organized. They had, one message, weren't competing, and, so people got it up on the Hill. And again, I think we as an industry have to think through what is best for the industry and maybe not necessarily what's best for, a trade organization.
Yeah, it's a really, it's a really hard, I know that it's a really hard ask for people, right? Because if you were to consolidate, you've got leadership where you've got redundancies, and you've got boards where you've got redundancy. And yet, if you step back and say, what is it that's actually going to make the industry better? I actually want to pop this comment up. I think that this is, and I think this is such an important thing. But as we look at this, do we dilute it in order to protect it, or do we walk away? And it's a business. In some sense, it's like a business that every business at times comes up with something that they used to do that they look at it and they say it's not working anymore. It's not working as well as it should. What if we did something different? And it's such a hard thing to do. So how do we actually make it? So how do we make this happen? That's my question.
Look, I think a couple things. One is, I think the last try, to your point, was 10 some years ago. It's been a decade. I think it's good that we have some fresh blood. Maybe go at it again. People who understand that, hey, look, what's best for the industry. I think quite frankly, a lot of this, to your point, has been egos. So let's set the egos aside and let's figure out what's best for the industry again. From a dollar standpoint, look, people are paying dues on both sides, right? Some people are paying both. Some people have to make a decision, one or the other. And if you follow the money, do the math, right? The folks who are going to have the most to contribute are the people with capital, your ownership groups, right? Whether it be the REITs, whether it be the PE firms, whether it be, the investors. But the investor base, right? They're the ones who can contribute the most. And when you talk to them, they're confused about, well, who do I give to? Do I have to cut a check twice? Why can't I just cut one check and be done with it? Right. So I think this involves getting, sort of the two exec teams for both organizations back into a room and figure out, hey, and talking about what is best for the industry. And I think the membership base should be, asking their trade association leaders, why two? What is the benefit of having two?
Yeah, I think that perhaps that really is what the message ought to be here at this platform is that if you're an operator, if you're an owner, you ought to be going to both those associations and saying, "Hey guys, we are." I mean, what you're really saying, this is me. You're more diplomatic about it than I am, but in a sense, what you're really saying is, guys, we're wasting millions of dollars a year by having two trade associations, and imagine what that could do if that were focused on really getting in front of legislative leaders who have so much control over, not just our businesses, but really control over the lives of
Yeah.
two sets of really frail populations, the older people and the frontline staff. And imagine what we could do if we could figure out how to, what it would do for even for residents. We could figure out how to make this work better so we could pay our caregivers more money, so we could bring in better quality people.
Look, I would, argue a little bit. It's not just about being more efficient with, money, but it's about the ability to bring in more capital. Because again, people are sitting on the sidelines going, well, wait a minute, who do I give to? Do I really need to give to both? Is that the most efficient way of doing it? And I do believe that if there was one trade organization that spoke for the industry, you would have more people participating.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think that you're absolutely right that there are people, when you don't know where to give money, you don't flip a coin and say, you say, well, I'm not going to give to anybody. And that just is not helpful to anybody. So one more question I'd really like to ask you, and I talked to you about it before we went on air. Can you talk a little bit about what happened at Eclipse? I remember I was in Palm Springs at a conference, and the announcement came that it was shutting down, and there was kind of this shock. And I think you were actually scheduled to be at that conference and didn't make it because of this. And I think there are a lot of people who just would love to hear kind of your take on what happened.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm not sure if I was supposed to speak at that conference or not, but probably was more of a scheduling thing than the Eclipse thing. Look, first and foremost, I want to say I couldn't be more proud of everyone who was part of Eclipse and worked at Eclipse. The people worked night and day, and I truly believe, like many other operators, the people there, saved lives during COVID. So, from frontline staff to executive directors, to the exec team, everyone worked tirelessly on it. I also want to say that I don't think there's anything I would have done differently. Look, we started Eclipse back in 2017. We got our business license on November 2017. We took over 80 plus communities in January of 2018. So basically 60 days. Yeah. And I challenge to see if anyone's ever done that before. Yeah. And what we did is, we managed basically, portfolios, that were distressed. So, owners, brought those portfolios to us to help turn them around. And I'm proud to say that we're in the process of getting those turned around. The turnaround was there. In fact, we took on a new portfolio in December of 2019, which I think is, truth, that shows, how things were going, and people, felt, good about us and sending us more portfolios. I think, the challenge is that, those turnarounds. So they come to us, probably, performing less than optimum. That's why they send them our way. Yeah. So as you're going, as you're, fixing things and going back up, well, look, we all know what happened in March of 2020. COVID hit, and the world changed after that. So that's a lot of pressure to put on a company that has 120 plus communities that are all, again, distressed. So, look, it is, as I think, the press has stated, it is a result of, the impact of what was going on that was outside of our control. But all that said, I couldn't be more proud of the people, of Eclipse.
So one of the things, and this is, I'm actually really a little scared about asking because we didn't talk about it in advance. But one of the things, there's this tension, right, between Yeah, I hear fairly frequently operators saying, one of the reasons we're not doing better is the capital partners are being unreasonable in terms of budgets and giving us the money we spend. And
Right.
then I've heard other people kind of on the capital side saying, well, sometimes they actually don't ask and they don't make a good case for it because we're actually willing to spend money if it makes sense. And there seems to be this real tension there, and it's hard to know. And I'd love to have you, as somebody who's been on both sides, I'd love to have your
Yeah.
perspective on that.
Yeah, it is interesting because I have been on both sides, right? I've been on the operator side, I've been on the capital
Yeah.
side, so I get both perspectives. And this is where I'm going to say there are no bad guys in this scenario. Let me start by saying that. Okay.
Yeah.
I think part of this is if you take a look at the industry and the construct of the industry, in senior living, the default management fee for senior living operators, what's market or default is generally on 5%. Okay.
Yep.
That's like the starting point for a lot of management fees. And 5%, when you think about it, and again, this has nothing to do with owner groups or operators, but that's sort of like the industry default. When
Yep.
you look at that compared to other industries, it's pretty thin, right? Especially in a highly operationally intensive industry like we are. So the question becomes, is 5% actually enough, right? Is that the proper amount? In hospitality, they charge a management fee, they charge a brand fee, they charge a technical services fee, they charge, occupancy fees, right? So all that together, you're probably in the low teens, right? I was in hospitality before, right? And I was at Canyon Ranch, and it's a little different there because we were charging like $5,000 a night, but
Yeah.
but again, the construct of the business is different. So I think this is more a question of from an industry standpoint, are we structured the right way to begin with? And is that what it takes to run a company? I remember having a discussion with somebody, with an ownership group, when I was on the operator side. Why don't we discuss what it takes to actually get to your target, and then I'll tell you what it's going to take to get there, and then you just pay me that. Why are we starting with 5%?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's a really fascinating question because and I'm sure this is true for you in your personal life, there are lots of times where I don't go out and buy the cheapest alternative because I know that buying the cheapest alternative is not going to get me the results that I want. And so, I think that, let's say, just going from 5 to 6%, it's not a nothing dollar amount for sure, but it's not a huge dollar amount. But what if going from, say from 5 to 8%, but you went from, you had better resources and you could go from a industry 83% to even 90%, would that be worth paying the extra 3%? Right. And I think the math is pretty easy on that.
Yeah. Look, I think right now a lot of operators are challenged. Let's expand this a little bit, right? We've talked about how senior living maybe isn't the quickest to adopt new technology, right?
Yeah.
Look, part of the question is who's paying for the new technology? Is it the ownership group at the community level, or is it going to be the operator who's making 5 whatever percent, right? How do you absorb those additional technology costs, right? Right now, one of the biggest challenges is getting labor. Every operator right now really is a staffing agency at the end of the day, right? If I can't staff, it's hard for me to grow occupancy, right? So, but in order to do that in today's world where recruiting is much more robust, you've got to bring on additional recruiting resources. Well, who's paying for that? Right. So a capital partner or investor can go, how come you're not hiring enough people fast enough? Well, the question becomes, well, as an operator, do I have the resources to do so? Right. Because it is math. Right. So, hey, if I have to double the amount of people I hire, I should probably double the amount of recruiters I have. I should probably double my recruiting spending. And who's paying for that? Right. So I do think, right now the conversation should be, what does it cost to actually run, and drive performance?
So do you feel like on the capital side, they're more open to rethinking this?
Look, I think there are those who realize that I hear the scenarios that you're trying to get to. I get that, these are like the world has changed a little bit. So yeah,
Yep.
I think the smart ones realize that yes, additional resources are needed in today's world. The world has changed and we need to adjust for that. So I think the smart investors, have gone that path. Not everyone's there yet. And I think, it'll be interesting to see if we can have this discussion in 5,
Yep.
10 years and see how things have
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah. So Todd asked, and I think it's a good question, is what do you think the right management fee structure might be?
Yeah. Look, I go back to the discussion I had with an investor, before, which is, look, tell me what you're trying to get to, and I'll put together the cost to get there. It may not be a certain management fee, right? Because not all communities are created equal. Look,
That's right.
a 40 unit, mid-market, 3,000 rev poor, community, needs different things than a 200 unit, AL, IL memory care, community
Yeah.
who's charging, 6,000 rev poor. It's a different construct. So I think part of that plays into it as well. So I'm not sure there's going to be a one size fits all. You may have different deviations of it. Again, you can go to, similar to hospitality, you could charge a management fee, maybe a technical services fee, maybe a occupancy type of fee. So there are different structures to get there to provide the results we want, rather than just a flat, simple, sort of 5%.
Yeah. So Kai, we are out of time. We've hit some really heavy duty stuff here.
Yeah.
And I think great thoughtful conversation. What I love is your optimism, as I have, for the future of the industry. And clearly, we've got some things to learn and to figure out and those kinds of things. So with that, we are going to sign off. You can stay on for just 1 minute after I stop the broadcast. Sure. And with that, we'll see you next week.